Lost in the dark.
Welcome back, Crip Crow. Welcome back, everyone, to this edition of Lost in the Dark podcast. This is a big one. My friends. Just happened to line up episode 250. Quite, a bit of a mile mark. It's something. It's something at least. Not only episode 250, this is our 2022 Halloween special. Now, as you've probably already noticed, this one looks a little bit different. This is going to be a little bit different. In past years, we've really gone all out for the holiday specials and everything. This year, due to many unforeseen circumstances, life, we weren't able to come together and put together a whole big old special for you like we normally do. But I had an idea. I had something in the back pocket. I was like, just in case we can't, I have this thing. And instead of me just sitting here and talking to you for the next hour or so of some paranormal stories and encounters and all that sort of a thing, a few months ago now, I started a brand new podcast called Follow the Reaper, where shout out to Children of Bodom, all my metalhead friends. Follow the Reaper podcast. It's an all paranormal podcast. Anyone that's been following Lost in the Dark for this long knows that besides heavy metal, the world of the paranormal is another fascination of mine, another passion of mine, something that I've been into since I was a little kid. I go on, ghost hunts and all kinds of stuff. I'm very involved in it. We've had member the Michigan UFO sightings and paranormal encounters podcast. We've had them on our show. We've been on their show. So we've even interacted with other members in the paranormal community on the podcasts and everything. And everyone knows every band I have on, the first time I have them on, or really any guest, the last question I always ask is, have you ever had an experience in your life that you would describe as paranormal? So it's always been a big thing for me. And with the help of Wayne from Michigan UFO Sightings and Paranormal Encounters podcast, his encouragement and just and finding influence in other podcasts, finding a format that I identified with, I liked. I never really knew how to approach it. In fact, there was a point in time where Lost in the Dark podcast in its early inception was going to be a paranormal podcast. It wasn't always going to be a metal podcast at first. So it's been a long time coming, and I finally started it, Follow the Reaper. And what I thought I would do for this Halloween edition of Lost in the Dark is play an episode from Follow the Reaper, show you guys what it is and what it's all about, and just show it to this audience. So it keeps in line with the Halloween thing and all that. I know this is coming out quite a bit after Halloween. I think it's the 10th right now, so 10 days after Halloween. But I also felt like this was perfect because this particular episode of Follow the Reaper, which also was coming out today simultaneously on it's a audio only podcast, no video. So it's coming out on Spotify and Apple Music, or Apple Podcasts, sorry. And it features a very, very special guest. So the idea of Follow the Reaper is I get submissions from listeners or anybody that stumbles across the show. They can either send me a written submission of their true first or secondhand paranormal encounter, or they can just record a voice memo on their phone telling me their story and just email it to Follow the Reaper podcast, Lost in the Dark podcast, all at Gmail, or our Instagrams or Facebooks of the same names. Any of that, especially Follow the Reaper and Lost in the Dark, I am the pretty much only one that sees and reads. And so if you message any of those things, you're messaging me directly. So I'm looking for stories, and that's what Follow the Reaper is a collection of stories, and I do research on them. I try to dive deep into them. I give you anything I can. I react to them, and I just want it to be a place for people to tell their stories. And as a matter of fact, this episode that we're featuring here on Lost in the Dark tonight is episode 7 of Follow the Reaper. The first 4 or so episodes of Follow the Reaper were pretty much just me telling my personal stories, sharing all of them with all of you. so it was before I had any submissions or anything. And now where I'm getting a couple, at least I've had a few. So this one features one of those submissions. This one in particular is special and I thought rolled perfectly into Lost in the Dark because on this episode of Follow the Reaper, it features a call from a very good friend of mine, Crystal, who happens to be the fiance of Clint, the lead singer of Lansing Legends, Recorruptor, who they were one of the first bands ever on Lost in the Dark podcast. They have been on many times. Clint, in fact, did like a 4.5, 5 hour long podcast with us once. It was fucking amazing. And as a matter of fact, I'm pretty sure the first time ever that Recorruptor came over to do a podcast in person, long before we were on video, like we were just starting out. This is less than 50 episodes in. Crystal was there. Crystal came with them and was in the room while we recorded. I think I even brought her in at one point. I think she got on the mic at one point. So it was very, very special for me and very awesome to have Crystal be one of the first submissions that we got on Follow the Reaper. And as a matter of fact, at the time of this recording, and believe it or not, I'm going to turn around this fast, the day this got released. I'm recording this and the day this got released at the same time. It happens to be Crystal's birthday today. So huge shout out, huge, massive happy birthday, Crystal. I hope you're having a great birthday. From the bottom of my heart, I can never thank you enough again for submitting, being one of our first submissions ever on Follow the Reaper podcast for this. This is just an amazing, amazing. She goes into great detail about her personal and some family paranormal interactions and encounters that they've had. It's a truly amazing story that I can't wait for you all to hear. So I just wanted to give that little intro to, you know, this Halloween special. I know it's coming out late. I know it's a little bit different, but there's no way in hell that Lost in the Dark wasn't going to have a Halloween special every year. So this is it for 2022. I'm introducing you all, this audience, to my new venture, Follow the Reaper podcast. It's audio only, so you're just going to see the logo the whole time for the duration of the Follow the Reaper episode, and I'll come back in at the end for the outro. But again, this one features Crystal. Thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. It means the world. Happy birthday. I really hope you're having a great day. And everyone, thank you for tuning in for this Halloween special from Lost in the Dark. And join me in welcoming in this new thing I'm trying, this new thing I'm giving a shot. Follow the Reaper podcast. And if you or anyone you know has a first or second hand true paranormal encounter that they would like to share with me, either privately or on the show, please feel free to reach out to any of Follow the Reaper or Lost in the Dark's social medias or Gmails. I would love to hear from you. So without further ado, my friends, here it is, episode 7 of Follow the Reaper. Throughout history, myth, legend, and folklore, the Reaper has always been our guide to the other side. My name is Burton, and join me as we follow the Reaper. As the days grow shorter and the nights grow longer, the veil between worlds gets thinner. Thank you for joining me on this episode. Let's dim the lights, settle in, and follow me down this paranormal black hole. Tonight's call is an extra special one. Tonight, we have a series of haunting stories from my own hometown of Lansing, Michigan, coming to us from a very good friend of mine. So, Crystal, Take it away.
So I guess just to start, all the incidences have happened to my mother, my aunt Kina, my cousin Lucas, and my grandparents, and my great grandma Juanita. So I'll probably just keep referring to my great grandma Juanita as Grandma Juanita, and just my grandparents as my grandparents. So this happened at a house on the north side of Lansing. It's still there. I drive by every now and then just to like look, because childhood memories and stuff. But it's on Ballard Street. The layout of the inside of the house, because most of the incidences take place upstairs, but the house just had an eerie vibe. But the upstairs and the room to get upstairs was always just very creepy and dark, in my opinion. So when you walk in the house, it would just be, an open like floor plan. It would be the living room and like just the computer room area, and then through that's the kitchen, and then the steps from the kitchen go to the basement. But before you even get to the kitchen, there's a little walkway to get to the bathroom. And the bathroom is between two rooms, one that's facing, outside, and the other one that was just facing towards the back, if you will, and had the stairs to go upstairs. So you couldn't get to or from upstairs without going through that one room. And from what I recall, that room was my grandpa's room. Now, I unfortunately don't have any memory of my grandparents. They died, I know my grandmother died in 95, and I think my grandpa was just a year before her. I was born in 92, so I was around, but I don't have any memories, unfortunately, or nothing that would stick out. But that room to go upstairs at that time was my grandpa's room. And Grandma Juanita's room was like upstairs, and she would just, that would be her room. And I guess there was one time that my grandpa was shaving in the bathroom, and my grandma Juanita, she just had come home from church. We're a Catholic-based family, if you will, but this generation now of us, we don't really attend church like that, and I think it all slowly digressed. My grandma Juanita would go to church. My grandma, she was a nun before, and she also attended church, I am assuming. So Grandma Juanita would come home from church and, make her way upstairs. And I guess when my grandpa was shaving, she had come in, and she went to her room upstairs, and she had to walk past him. And as he was shaving, he was all like, "Oh, you're home?" Asking her stuff, and she didn't respond. And she just walked past him and past the room to get upstairs. And he was like, like, "Hello?" Okay. No response, so didn't think too much of it. And then not even 5 minutes later, Grandma Juanita actually came in from outside and was just walking in like normal. And my grandpa was confused because he had already seen her clearly walk past him, heard her go up the stairs, but I guess it wasn't her. I don't know how to properly even explain if it was her or just her figure, her body. I don't know, her spirit. because it's like he saw her full figure. Like there was no way you could go past the bathroom without making direct full eye body contact with the person getting to the other room. Like you have to walk and see somebody right there. And he's seen her and nothing. And she came home and he said, well, like, didn't you just walk inside? Weren't you already here? You made your way upstairs? And she was like, no, what are you talking about? I just got home from church. And my mom and my cousins say that the hairs on the back of my grandpa's neck stood up because he was really freaked out. And that's a little mini story. And then my cousin Lucas, he recalls same house. My cousin Lucas would like live there or stay there for a while, you know, just get away, or just pretty sure that he was just living there at that time. He was watching TV in the room facing the street, and that he heard Grandma Juanita come in, and, you know, he was like, oh, you're home from church already? And Grandma Juanita didn't say anything. She again walked past the bathroom, walked through the other room, and made her way upstairs. And Lucas was like, Grandma, are you okay? Or, you know, anything? And didn't hear anything back. And then Lucas had heard steps coming from upstairs all the way down, but nobody was there. And like Lucas was like, he's a curious fella. he used to do the Ouija boards and stuff, which probably didn't help, of course, in this house. So he used to do the Ouija boards. Even currently now, he can still do tarot cards. And he's just really spiritual when it comes to things like that. I typically go to him for advice on stuff if I need it. I got some of these stories from him myself. And that Grandma Juanita's steps were coming down, but he didn't see her or anything. And he was looking, and, you know, there was nothing. And he heard them like run to the basement. And, you know, like, to get to the basement, you had to go through the living room, through the kitchen, down the steps. And my grandpa was sleeping in the living room with the TV on. And even Lucas was like following the steps, and then saw that they made their way to the basement, and was like, not gonna do that. Just because the basement was always just scary. It's creepy. It was always like a cellar style basement from what I remember, but I honestly have only been in that basement maybe like twice, because it is scary to me. And I never went alone. I always went with my cousin Mary, and it was only ever to like switch laundry out or something, but we were never down there too long. And it was always a race up the steps, because it always felt like as soon as you made it up the steps, somebody was going to grab your ankle and like drag you down. So we always ran up there, and then we always slammed the door shut and locked it. And it always just felt like as soon as we shut the door and locked it, that it was somebody on the other side just staring at you. Kind of now makes me think of like a 13th Ghost vibe, of how they were behind the glass, but, you know, nothing could come through because it was shut, if you will. And that's how it felt coming from the basement. And who knows, maybe it was just us being scared, because, you know, we ran up the stairs because we were scared, but it was always an eerie feeling. Anywho, so Lucas didn't want to go to the basement, so he woke my grandpa up and was like, Theo, where's Grandma? And, you know, Grandma didn't just run down here. And Grandpa was like, what are you talking about? Grandma's not home yet from church. And as they were going back and forth, if you will, they heard a car pull up and a door slam, and Grandma Juanita walked in. And I guess Lucas was just, you know, like, what in the world? Because, like, you heard the steps go up the stairs and all the way back down, all the way to the basement. And it wouldn't be anybody else but Grandma Juanita. And he was just like, were you not just inside? And Grandma Juanita was like, what are you talking about? You know, what's the matter? I just got home from church, you know. And Lucas was just like, nothing, never mind. And that was that for Lucas. And even the neighbors across the street, just because upstairs was always so scary, the neighbors across the street from them, the Lopez's, they said that they would see somebody upstairs in the window, because there was only one window, and it was, you know, just a middle of an upstairs, like, you know. And they would see somebody in the window. I'm not sure if this person was just standing there or if they were walking. I want to assume they were probably standing there, because it's the way the upstairs is laid out. It's just weird. And they told my family that, you know, we see someone upstairs every now and then. And they were all like, oh, that's just Grandma Juanita, you know, that's where she's just at. And they were like, no, this is not Juanita. This lady has a flowy dress. And it's not Juanita. And, you know, back then, everybody used to kick it outside. You know, everybody would hang out. It's like, this is all on the north side. Everybody's kicking it outside. Especially my family around that area. And just the whole Hispanic community growing up, if you will. Everybody was outside kicking back. You know, everybody knew everybody. I guess there was also another incident where my Theo Sparky, he was just outside on the road just kicking back, and they saw Grandma Juanita stick her head out of the window and just look. And they were just like, oh, is she okay? I wonder if she's okay, you know. And he made his way inside, and Grandma Juanita basically was like, what are you talking about? I didn't stick my head out the window. What are you talking about? But she was in the room when it happened. So I myself has, ever since these stories, I always wondered if something was attached to her or what. Like, if I could be a fly on the wall for an incident where something's happening, or she was just up there just because it's so creepy up there. I couldn't imagine sleeping up there, and I really never did. But, like, going upstairs, you'd have to, like I said, go through my grandpa's room, and there were about, like, 3 steps that curved, and then it took you straight up. And as soon as we would go up there, we wouldn't know, because we wouldn't even get up there. Everybody always went up first, and I didn't, because I was always scared. But anytime you would go up the steps, before you even got up the steps, just turning to look up there, it felt like somebody was already staring at you at the top of the steps. For me, it felt like somebody was standing there, you know, hand on their hips, just looking down. And so walking up it wasn't as scary, but when I got to the top, it didn't feel like somebody was staring at me with their hands on their hips anymore, but it felt like somebody was right in my face every single time. Like, in my face, nose to nose, almost eyeballs to eyeballs close. It always felt like somebody was just right there. And walking through the 2 rooms, it always just felt weird. I never wanted to be up there for too long, but there were a few incidences where I went to sleep up there because that's where my cousins were, but I always went home. I always cried to go home whenever I stayed the night when I was younger at any place. But you would think, you know, why would I be like that with my cousins? You know, nothing was ever weird growing up with them. They're my cousins. I was hung out with them, and like we grew up together. So I just always felt weird upstairs. And even like getting anything from upstairs, for me, it always felt like whatever was staring at me was also just walking with me, hands behind their back, like leaned over just to see what I'm doing and following me the whole time. It always gave me like the presence of a man. Like I felt like it was like a man angry, like what are you doing up here? You know, why are you looking through my stuff type of stuff. It always just felt like that to me, but apparently it's just a lady in a flowy dress upstairs. And even my mom and my Aunt Kina would talk about how they would be in the living room and they would hear like footsteps upstairs, knowing nobody was up there. And there was even one time where they said that it was really bad that they actually ran out of the house because it sounded like if you were to take a wooden chair up there and just move it on its side left and right on the feet, it felt like that. Or if somebody was jumping, I mean, it sounded like that. So they got out and, you know, but they lived there. So at some point they had to go back in, right? And I just know that they would do Ouija board stuff in that house, which if you ask me, I would never. I'm not into the Ouija board stuff just because I wholeheartedly believe that you are opening a door that people properly don't know how to close. And I feel like my family is a good example for that, just because that they would do the Ouija board. I don't think they ever closed it properly, if you will. And just from some stories that Lucas has told me, and even incidents that happen to him still to this day, makes me believe that something is following him or is attached to him himself. Even his wife, she was just like, none of this weird stuff has ever happened until you. So I think something's following Lucas in a sense. I do feel like things get attached to us at some points for some reason. Obviously that I can't explain. And even once this incident, I'm not, if you want to edit it out, that's totally fine. If not, I'm sure it's still fine with being said. But my cousin Lucas has an incident where he says that he feels presences in his house now, and even voices. And that one of the voices even called him by his Christian name. So, my cousin Lucas, he is a transgendered male, which is also more reason why I think he was living with my grandpa at the time of all the incidences before, because his mother doesn't take it well and didn't take it well, and, you know, all that bullshit. But something called him by his Christian name. And as long as I've known Lucas, Lucas has been Lucas. Like, I've always known, because, you know, my family talks, if you will. But I've only ever known Lucas as Lucas. So to know that something that called him by his Christian birth name, I just think something's following him. Just another quick incident for the basement. Since upstairs it's just mostly about, you know, the lady in white, and something's up there. Even like standing outside looking through that window, it felt like something was just there. But I could never explain what it is or who it was or anything. But with the basement, after my grandma passed away, my cousin Mary, I think she was a baby, and she had fallen down the steps. And it was, you know, like a basement steps. Like, there were like probably 12 steps. I can't remember if they were wood or not, but landing was on concrete. And they said how Mary fell down the steps and she, you know, tumbled all the way down. And by the time my mom and Kina got to her, she was already at the bottom. I think she was crying or not. But they said that she did not have a single scratch on her. Like, nothing was wrong. No scratch, no bruise, no nothing. So the basement was always creepy, and then the upstairs was always creepy. Sorry. And I don't think things follow the family, but I also remember this incident that my niece actually just reminded me about. That when my mom, I want to say she was pregnant or so, at a different house. This house was on Dakin, and it didn't feel weird or anything in there at all, other than like the basement. But it felt like Freddy Krueger scary in the basement of that house. And my mom talked about how they had a waterbed at the time. I guess I should say that, they were cool enough to have one of those. And she was laying on it one time. This was after my grandpa and grandma have already passed. And she was just laying on there. My dad was in the living room, and something pushed on the bed and, moved the whole bed. And yeah, she was freaked out and called my dad. And she also believes that that's just my grandpa, because he told her that when he does pass that he will mess with her, because she wasn't scared, but it was just an incident that, unexplained. And even to this day, she talks about how she can smell him just around the house. There'll be some times where she's just walking around and she's like, I smell my dad. Do you smell that? I smell my dad. And like I said earlier, I don't remember him or have any recollection of him, so I don't smell anything, and nobody really does either. It's just her. And then another incident is with my grandma. When she passed, my mom was really sad, of course, and all that, and she didn't want to come out of the house at all, didn't want to do anything. So one day my dad actually was like, you got to get out of the house. Let's just go with me to the grocery store and just get out of the house for a little bit. So she went, and knowing my family, they went to a Meijer. And she said that she was just walking in, and she was just looking down, and she felt someone push her. And like this lady pushed her, full hand, kind of shove her. And my mom didn't think too much of it because, you're in a grocery store, you kind of have stuff like that happen here and there. And my mom says something told her just to turn around and look at the lady. And my mom turned and looked at the lady. And she says that lady had my grandma's face. Like, she looked exactly like my grandma, like if that was my grandma. And that she like smiled and looked away. And she describes that lady as like a bag lady, an older type lady, which makes me think of like, what is she? The bird lady from Home Alone. Gives me that type of bag lady vibes. But apparently she had the face of my grandmother, and my mom's just said how she's gotten chills about it, and it's something that she just remembers to this day. So I don't necessarily think stuff is attached to this family. I think something is attached to Lucas himself. But I just think there's another, I don't know if you want to call it a spirit realm, but I believe that some spirits are out there and they are here to protect us, and some are not. And I believe the ones that interact with my immediate family are no harm. But the one attached to Lucas, I feel like, means harm. So, yeah, that's all I really have for some spooky stories, if you will. If you'd like, I'm sure I can get in touch with Lucas more and probably voice record our conversations or anything if anything else that he has to add, since I feel like stuff is attached to him. He has his own incidences from different houses and just throughout his life. All that stuff happened when he was, I want to say, in his teens, and Lucas is now late 50s, early 60s. So yeah, that's all I got. Bye.
And now some words from some friends of ours.
Mind on the rack. twisting strain, painting me black, portrait of pain.
This is Wayne
And Michelle,
from the Michigan UFO Sightings and Paranormal Encounters podcast.
and you are listening to our good friend Burton, the host of the Follow the Reaper podcast.
Prepare your soul for the reap.
Without a care, all-consuming entity, total depravity.
Well, my goodness. Moving beds, footsteps, smells, voices, doppelgangers. The story truly has it all, and a lot to unpack. Thank you, Crystal, so much for submitting these stories. It truly means a lot. Now, normally, I'd start by providing some possible logical explanations for stories that have been submitted. But I have to say, this one took my breath away. Anyone who has heard the first 4 episodes of this podcast have heard many of my own personal and family stories. Crusoe's story are like all of those rolled into one. Between the footsteps running down the stairs to seeing something in the upstairs window, we seem to have a lot of similarities in our stories. One of the first things I would like to touch on is Crystal mentioned while being in that house, she always felt the need to race up the stairs from the basement because it always felt like someone was right behind you or about to grab you. This part really stuck out to me because I personally cannot tell you how many times I have felt that way. Simply too many to count. Living in some of the houses I grew up in to my grandparents' houses. Well, nothing ever really happened in any of these places in regards to the paranormal. I used to always get that feeling as a small child that something was right on my heels, about to get me. The next part of the story that I would like to touch on is the fact that this is now the second story we've had submitted where the use of a Ouija board may be involved. Now, as I said on the last episode, I personally have yet to see the evidence to believe in something like a Ouija board or a spirit board. I myself have used one once before in a haunted asylum during a thunderstorm. And nothing really happened. Not to say that they aren't real, not to say that they can't open doors, not to say that people don't have very real experiences. I just have yet to experience them myself. And if there is any truth to the Ouija board theory, I think Crystal's right. Many people may not know how to close those gates properly. And the final thing that I would like to touch on, the by far most terrifying aspect of these stories, the doppelganger. For a little explanation and history, this clip comes to us from Through the Looking Glass on YouTube. As always, links below.
Have you ever thought it would be kind of cool to meet yourself or someone that looks exactly like you? Well, be careful what you wish for, because according to several superstitions, meeting your doppelganger is a really, really bad thing. Hi there, I'm Dave Nelson, and you have stepped through The Looking Glass. This is the YouTube channel that's all about parallel worlds, time travel, and other strange phenomena. If you enjoy this or any of my other videos, please consider subscribing to the channel. I'd really appreciate it. Now, let's get going here. The word doppelganger is used pretty casually to mean someone who looks exactly like you. But the story behind the term has a much darker, sinister side. Doppelganger is a German word that means double walker. And according to ancient legend, it's not just someone who resembles you, but it's a supernatural creature that's a literal duplicate of you. So, without further ado, here's 4 of the most horrifying things people over time have believed about doppelgangers. The most widely known myth, according to both English and German folklore, is that seeing your doppelganger often means that death will soon follow. This idea is backed up by many stories throughout time about people who have died shortly after seeing their doppelganger multiple times. There's a long-held belief that a doppelganger is basically your evil twin, who supposedly purposely gives you bad advice in a malicious way. They might also try to plant sinister ideas inside the victim's mind. According to Norse mythology, and they have the best mythology, a doppelganger is essentially a ghostly double who lived before you. Stories describe incidents which are basically deja vu in reverse, where a spirit with the subject's footprints, scent, voice, or appearance precedes them to a location or an activity, resulting in witnesses believing they've seen or heard the person before they physically arrive. The Hopi First Nations people of North America have a legend that good people live in the upper world and evil people live in the underworld. The Hopi believe that whatever's happening in the upper world, the exact opposite is happening in the underworld, which is where your doppelganger is from. Do you think doppelgangers are real? And if so, is one of these mythologies also correct? I'm not quite sure myself, but let me know what you think in the comments section. And if you liked this video, you might enjoy this one as well. I'm Dave Nelson. Thanks for watching. We'll talk to you next time.
Now, a doppelganger is typically considered a spiritual entity who takes on the form of someone familiar to fool the viewer for some, more often than not, nefarious purpose. Crystal mentioned 3 different instances where a doppelganger was seen. Once, while her grandfather was shaving, he saw her grandmother walk by after getting home from church, only to find out it wasn't her. And again, Cousin Lucas. And again, when she was supposed to be getting home from church, both times, only to arrive moments later. And then a third time, when people saw her stick her head out of a window, only to find out later it was not in fact her. Crystal, in her stories, mentioned attachments, at least the folklore surrounding things like Ouija board and spirituality in general. Attachments are a thing that can happen if using a spirit board or simply just trying to contact the dead. I can't say if that is what's happening here, but when it comes to the doppelganger, at least in many recent stories and folklore that I've heard regarding these entities, it is rarely a positive one. Oftentimes, it's some sort of negative or demonic entity being a trickster, trying to gain trust. Another fascinating aspect of these doppelganger stories is that 2 of the times is in part that they're known as being mischievous and negative entities. And 2 of the times that the grandmother doppelganger was seen were when she was expected to be returning home from church. Almost as if it was mocking the very act of attending or religion itself. And then the story of the doppelganger in the grocery store. This, believe it or not, Crystal, is one I've heard before. People seeing passed on relatives' faces on other people in odd situations like at a grocery store. These are experiences I simply have no explanation for. And as a paranormal enthusiast and podcaster myself, I listen to and watch a lot of current paranormal related entertainment, especially podcasts like this one, where they talk about true stories. And I have begun to notice a massive increase in stories of doppelgangers lately. So when I first listened to this call from Crystal, it sent chills down my spine because of all the other recent stories I have heard. And Crystal, if you're hearing this, yes, of course, we would love to hear a follow-up call from you and Lucas. That would be truly special. And thank you again from the bottom of my heart for submitting your stories. You have no idea what it means. And that's going to do it for this episode. Thank you all so much for listening. I hope you are all having a wonderful haunted season. And don't forget, if you or anyone you know has a story they would like to share, please just record a voice memo on your phone and send it to me at followthereaperpodcast@gmail.com or on Instagram or Facebook. Thank you all again so much for listening. And thank you for joining me as we follow the Reaper.
It's not a good day to be a bad guy.
What's up, metalheads? This is Wayne,
And Michelle.
and we are from the Michigan UFO Sightings and Paranormal Encounters podcast, and you are listening to
Burton and Aaron on the Lost in the Dark podcast.
Raise your horns.
So there it is. There it is. That is episode 7, still in its very small infancy of my new project, Follow the Reaper podcast, a all paranormal podcast where people send in their true first or secondhand paranormal encounters for me to either, I can narrate them if you write them in, or if I would much prefer them always to come from the person's voice themselves. So sending in a voicemail works fantastically. And I just love diving into this stuff. It's a real big passion of mine. And now I'm starting a little platform for it. Again, it's in its infancy. You know, I don't I know there's a lot of work yet to be done. I know there's a lot of places I need to take it. But for now, what I need more than anything are your stories from the listeners, stories from anybody seeing this right now. I need your stories to help me keep this thing going, because quite frankly, I'm almost running out. I've got a couple more stories of my own, and people that are directly around me on a daily basis that I can bring in and talk to. I can maybe fill another episode or two, but beyond that, I need help from you. I need your stories. So please, please, please reach out to me on Lost in the Dark podcast at Gmail, Facebook, or Instagram, or Follow the Reaper podcast at Gmail, Facebook, or Instagram. You are talking directly to me. If you send me anything, please reach out. I cannot wait to hear from you. From the bottom of my heart, it would mean the world. And from the bottom of my heart, it means the world. Thank you again so much, Crystal, for sending that in. That was an incredible story. And hopefully we'll get a follow-up from her and her cousin on a future episode of Follow the Reaper. So be sure to go to Spotify and Apple Podcasts to subscribe to Follow the Reaper podcast. And so that way, you know, anytime I drop a new episode, you'll be updated. I aim for one right now, just because I don't really have enough stories to fill it. Right now it's bi-weekly, and it's I try to drop them every Thursday. Okay. I try to drop them every Thursday bi-weekly right now until I get more stories. I'd love to go weekly, but I need more stories in order to do that. So bi-weekly Thursdays right now, Follow the Reaper podcast. So be sure to go to Apple and Spotify to subscribe and check them out. It would mean the world to me. So that's going to do it, my friends, for this edition of Lost in the Dark podcast, episode 250, our 2022 Halloween special. I hope you enjoyed it. I know it's not, you know, we didn't go as big as we normally do, but I hope you enjoyed it. I still got to show you something at least. And, you know, it would really mean the world to me if you guys checked out that other Follow the Reaper podcast. So that's going to do it for this one, my friends. As always, we're back again very, very soon with much, much more. Matter of fact, I think there's a new episode of Lost in the Dark coming out tomorrow. 251 already ready and in the bank. So I think that's going to come out, pretty much immediately. So but beyond that, we got a lot more coming, as always, very, very, very soon with so much more. But until next time, my friends, raise your fucking horns, bang your goddamn heads, and get spooky, get creepy, get fucking terrified. Check out Follow the Reaper podcast on Spotify and Apple. Love you all to death. Raise your horns. I hope you all had a wonderful and safe Halloween holiday, my favorite holiday of the year. Now we're getting into the rest. It's going to be a good rest of the year. Come on. Love you all to death. Raise your horns. Good night.
Lost in the dark.